What if the most feared weapon in the galaxy, the Death Star, had been commanded not by the cold arrogance of Grand Moff Tarkin, but by the calculated brilliance of Grand Admiral Thrawn? What if this master tactician, who understood his enemies better than they understood themselves, was the one deciding when and if the superweapon would be fired? Would Alderaan still stand? Would the rebellion even understand the danger they faced? Or would Thrawn's foresight make him the single most dangerous figure in galactic history? It had been 3 years since the battle for Lothal. 3 years since Grand Admiral Thrawn's meticulously laid campaign dismantled the Phoenix Cell, a rebel network that had plagued the Empire far longer than expected. Unlike the blunt, scorched earth tactics of many Imperial commanders, Thrawn's victory had been as much psychological as military. He dissected the rebels through their own culture, studying Lothal's art, architecture, and history to anticipate their movements. When the final strike came, it wasn't just overwhelming firepower that crushed the Phoenix Cell, it was inevitability. In the wake of that triumph, Thrawn's influence in the Imperial hierarchy soared. While many Moffs and Admirals resented the alien Chiss, his results could not be denied. Even the Emperor himself spoke of Thrawn as one of his most effective instruments. But in the corridors of Coruscant's Imperial Palace, another name carried equal weight: Grand Moff Tarkin. Where Thrawn was deliberate and calculating, Tarkin was ruthless and pragmatic. Both had the Emperor's air, both commanded fear and respect, and now their paths were about to converge. Thrawn's rise had not dulled his obsession with intelligence gathering. He had been watching the flow of Imperial resources with a mind that could see patterns invisible to most. Dozens of sectors, from the outer rim to the deep core, showed irregularities in supply shipments, materials vanishing from records, and crew assignments redirected under vague security mandates. Thrawn did not believe in coincidences. What he saw in those figures was a gravitational pull. Thousands of disparate actions, all orbiting something massive. When the pattern became undeniable, he requested a private audience with Emperor Palpatine. In the dim throne room, with the Emperor's shadowed face barely visible beneath his hood, Thrawn laid out his findings. The scale is vast, Your Majesty. The concentration of Kyber crystal shipments alone, whatever it is, it could power a fleet, or destroy one. The Emperor's yellow eyes gleamed. You are correct, Grand Admiral. There is such a project, one that will reshape the galaxy. When Thrawn pressed for details, Palpatine smiled faintly. Not a gesture of warmth, but of amusement. Very well, you will see it, and you will command it, alongside Grand Moff Tarkin. The first time Thrawn saw the Death Star, it hung in space like an artificial moon, a marvel of engineering, an obscenity of purpose. He understood immediately why the project had been kept secret for so long. Its size alone could shatter the morale of any enemy fleet. But his admiration for the design did not blind him to the truth. This was not a tool of precision. It was a weapon of terror. That truth put him in immediate philosophical conflict with Tarkin. Tarkin believed fear of the station's power was the surest way to keep systems in line. To him, mass destruction was not only justified, it was necessary. A single devastating example to keep the rest of the galaxy obedient. Alderaan, Jedha, Scarif, to Tarkin, they were just names on a list, waiting to be struck true. Thrawn's view was different. He valued civilian stability, understanding that indiscriminate slaughter only bred resistance. Destroy a city, and you destroy not just lives, but culture, the very thing Thrawn used to predict and control his enemies. More than once, the command deck of the Death Star became the stage for tense exchange. The galaxy must understand there is no rebellion without consequence, shouts Tarkin. Fear is a crude motivator, Grand Moff. People who live in fear learn to fight without it. Then we simply remind them again. And in doing so, you plant the seeds of the next war. The Emperor, for his part, allowed the friction. He seemed to enjoy watching them circle each other, testing the limits of their philosophies. When the Tantive 4 was intercepted, and Prince Leia Organa taken prisoner, Tarkin saw only an interrogation. Thrawn saw an opportunity. He requested access to the Death Star's extensive archives and studied Alderaanian art, architecture, and royal symbology. Through brushstrokes and sculpture, he read the mind of a people, and through them, the princess herself. He saw defiance in the clean lines of their portraits, duty in the recurring motifs of mountain peaks and skies. Leia would rather die than betray the rebellion. This knowledge led him to a quiet decision. There was no point in forcing her hand. Instead, he orchestrated her escape, allowing the Millennium Falcon to flee with its precious passenger, unaware that in doing so, they had confirmed the location of the rebel base. The data pointed to Yavin 4, a remote jungle moon with minimal civilian population. It was nonetheless the central hub of the Rebel Alliance. Destroy it, and the rebellion would lose its heart, its leadership, and its ability to coordinate galaxy-wide resistance. For Thrawn, the destruction of Yavin was a necessary evil, the only time he would unleash the Death Star's super laser on a world. His calculations reduced the approach time by nearly half compared to Tarkin's trajectory. Every hyperspace jump was plotted to shave minutes from the countdown. By the time the Rebel scouts realized the Death Star was in motion, it was already too late. The alarms in the Rebel base on Yavin 4 echoed through the ancient temples as panic spread like wildfire. Mechanics shouted orders, droids scrambled, and pilots raced to their ships. The jungle moon trembled under the weight of desperation. High above, a shadow eclipsed the stars. The Death Star had arrived, but something was wrong. The base's tactical officers whispered in disbelief. The timing was impossible. Every Imperial officer they had studied, every Imperial model they had simulated, suggested they should have had hours before the station could maneuver into range. Yet here it was, already preparing its firing sequence. Thrawn's calculations had sliced the window. The rebels hadn't planned for this. They weren't ready. Luke Skywalker sat in the cockpit of his X-Wing, trying to steady his breathing. The comm channels buzzed with frantic chatter. Red Squadron calling in, Gold Squadron checking coordinates, ground crew shouting last-second updates. Wedge's voice cut through the noise. "Stay sharp. We can do this." We have to do this. But Luke could hear the cracks in his friend's voice. They all could. The pilots knew the truth. This wasn't just another battle. If they failed, it wasn't ships or soldiers that would be lost. It was everyone. The first wave dove into the trench, the narrow walls rushing past them. Laser fire raked across the surface as TIE fighters screamed in pursuit. Luke's hands tightened on the controls. He had never flown in combat before. He tried to focus, to remember Ben's words, to reach for that calm place inside him. But every second was drowned by the pounding thought, if I fail, they all die. Gold Leader went in first. His Y-wing shuddered under the strain of enemy fire. He released his proton torpedoes. The missiles streaked toward the port and detonated harmlessly against a shimmering barrier. A gasp tore through Rebel comms. "It's shielded!" Gold 2 shouted. "The exhaust port is shielded!" In the command center, Leia's stomach dropped. The weakness Galen Erso had hidden in the design. Their only hope was gone. Thrawn had been waiting for them. Back in the trench, panic took hold. Pilots broke formation, scattering under the relentless pursuit of TIE fighters. More torpedoes were fired, but every shot met the same fate, stopped cold by the invisible wall of energy protecting the port. Luke's heart sank as he heard the screams of dying pilots through his headset. Red 6 was hit. Gold 5 spiraled out of control, his final words cut off by static. Each explosion was another nail in the coffin of hope. "This isn't working," Wedge yelled. "We can't do it. We can't." But they still fought on, because what else was there? On board the Death Star, the crew moved with eerie calm. Where the rebels were frantic, the Imperials were precise, efficient, guided by Thrawn's cold orders. The super laser array aligned, beams converging toward the reactor. On the command deck, officers recited the countdown. Super laser charging, 30 seconds until full power. Thrawn stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on Yavin below. He gave no smile, no gesture of triumph. To him, this was not victory. This was necessity. Tarkin, standing just a few feet away, almost sneered at the restraint. "We are more alike than you thought, Grand Admiral," he muttered. Thrawn did not respond. Luke and Wedge regrouped for one last run. R2 chirped anxiously behind Luke, the astromech's dome spinning in agitation. "Just a little longer," Luke whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "Just a little longer, please." The targeting computer flickered in front of him. He lined up the shot, his thumb hovering over the trigger. The torpedo streaked down, sparks lighting the trench. For one heartbeat, Luke thought maybe, just maybe. The blast flared against the ray shield, harmless as fireworks. Luke's scream of frustration tore through the cockpit. "No! No, it's not working!" On the comm, Wedge's voice broke. "They've got us. We're finished." Super laser fully charged. Target locked. Fire. The green beam erupted from the Death Star, converging into a single lance of light that ripped across the void. In the Rebel command center, Leia felt the ground shake. The walls of the ancient temple groaned as if the planet itself cried out. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer for those who could not escape. Outside the jungle moon of Yavin 4 blossomed into a blinding sphere of fire. The forests, the temples, the rivers, everything was consumed in an instant. The shockwave tore through the rebel fleet, obliterating ships too slow to escape. Luke's X-Wing shuddered violently as he pulled hard away from the fireball, his eyes wide with horror. Behind him, R2 shrieked as the flames licked the edges of their shields. Yavin. It's gone, Luke whispered, his voice hollow. A handful of ships had managed to jump to hyperspace at the last possible second. Leia, aboard a blockade runner, Admiral Akbar's cruiser, Hera Syndulla's ship carrying a few scattered survivors. But it was not victory they carried with them into the stars. It was grief. The rebellion was shattered, its leaders dead, its fighters scattered, its morale broken beyond recognition. For the first time, Luke Skywalker, farm boy turned pilot, felt the crushing weight of failure. Not just his own, but the failure of an entire galaxy. And deep in the cold corridors of the Death Star, Thrawn quietly ordered the recordings of the battle delivered to his personal chamber. One pilot's style stood apart, instinctive yet precise, improvisational yet guided by something deeper. Cross-referencing the flight data with Imperial records, Thrawn's eyes narrowed. The patterns matched perfectly with those of a pilot from the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker. So, Thrawn murmured in his private chamber, the son lives. It had been 2 years since the fires of Yavin consumed the rebel base and nearly every hope of freedom with it. 2 years since the galaxy had watched, trembling, as the indestructible weapon of the Empire revealed its true power. And in those 2 years, Princess Leia Organa had done everything in her power to rebuild. She travelled from system to system, pleading with senators, speaking with planetary rulers, rallying the dispossessed and the broken. But each time, the same answer was given in hushed tones. We cannot risk Yavin's fate. The mere threat of the Death Star was enough to silence entire worlds, and Thrawn knew it. He didn't need to fire the weapon again. He didn't need to reduce another world to ashes. The shadow of Yavin alone kept planets obedient, submissive, and afraid. This was the brilliance of his rule. Fear, not true chaos, but true control. The galaxy had become a chessboard, and every piece moved exactly where Grand Admiral Thrawn willed it. At first, Thrawn's ascension had caused friction. Tarkin had sneered at the notion that an alien, a Chiss outsider, could ever rival him in the Emperor's favour. But Palpatine was not blind. He saw in Thrawn a precision, a vision of order that even Tarkin lacked. And so, after months of bickering, Palpatine ended it. Tarkin was reassigned to oversee another of the Emperor's classified projects. Thrawn was left to command the Death Star, and increasingly, the Empire itself. From his command throne aboard the station, Thrawn shaped the galaxy. Food supplies were rerouted to systems on the brink of famine. Piracy along the mid-rim was brutally stamped out. Trade lanes ran efficiently, and for the common citizen, life under Thrawn's order was not only tolerable, it was better than the chaos of the Clone Wars or the cruelty of Tarkin's rule. But beneath the veneer of stability, whispers spread among Imperial officers. High-ranking admirals and governors disappeared after meetings with Thrawn. No one knew their fate, and none dared question it. In truth, these officers were not executed. Like his old friend Eli Vanto, they were sent, secretly and quietly, into the service of the Chiss Ascendancy. Thrawn's loyalty was never to the Emperor. It was to his people in the unknown regions. The Empire was his shield, his tool to ensure that no power in the galaxy could threaten the Ascendancy's survival. And for that, he would play the Emperor's game. Far away from the shadow of the Death Star, another figure was being shaped by time. Luke Skywalker had vanished from the galaxy's sight after Yavin. The rebellion believed he had gone underground to avoid Imperial reprisal. In truth, he had travelled to the swamps of Dagobah. There, hidden within the Darkside Nexus that masked all presence from Palpatine and Vader alike, Luke trained under the ancient Grand Master Yoda. For 2 years, Yoda pressed him to the breaking point. Lightsaber drills until his muscles screamed. Meditation until days blurred together. Lessons in patience, humility and restraint. Lessons Luke struggled with. Reckless, the boy is, Yoda often muttered to himself. Like his father. Too much like his father. But with every season, Luke grew stronger. He lifted stones, then trees, then his own starfighter. He faced visions in the dark cave and fought phantoms of his fear. And by the second year, Luke Skywalker was no longer a farm boy with dreams of adventure. He had become a warrior of the Force, his skills rivaling Jedi Knights of the Clone Wars. Yet his heart ached. While he trained, the galaxy suffered. While he meditated, systems fell deeper into Thrawn's iron grip. So when news reached him that the rebellion had been discovered on Hoth, Luke ignored Yoda's warnings. He would not sit idle any longer. The truth was far darker. Thrawn had known about the rebellion's Hoth base for months. His spies, his network, his precise analysis of supply routes, all had pointed to it. But Thrawn was patient. The rebellion was not the true prey. Luke Skywalker was. And so he set the bait. He leaked the information to a single man, Agent Kallus, a loyal Imperial officer to all appearances, but one Thrawn had correctly deduced as a rebel informant. Thrawn knew Kallus would pass it along. He wanted him to. When word reached the rebellion, they panicked, sending word to Luke that their position was compromised, exactly as Thrawn had foreseen. What Thrawn did not foresee was the ship. Luke had been gifted a specialised craft by the Mon Calamari shipwright Quarry, a vessel with a stealth field capable of slipping past blockades undetected. And so, while Thrawn's fleet and the looming Death Star waited above Hoth, scanning every starship, Luke passed through unseen. On the icy plains of Hoth, Luke reunited with Leia, Han and Chewbacca. Together, they devised a desperate plan. The Death Star could not be destroyed from the outside. They knew that now. They shielded the exhaust port, the impenetrable armour. Thrawn had accounted for every flaw. If they were to destroy it, they would need to cripple it from within. Their team was small but formidable. Luke Skywalker, Jedi apprentice, carrying the hopes of the galaxy. Leia Organa, leader of the shattered rebellion, sharp and unyielding. Han Solo and Chewbacca, smuggler and warrior, inseparable in their loyalty. Ahsoka Tano, once Anakin Skywalker's Padawan, now one of the few surviving Jedi. Captain Rex, veteran of the Clone Wars, whose loyalty had never wavered. R2-D2, their indispensable astromech. They would use Luke's stealth ship to slip aboard through a supposed weakness in the Death Star's defences, a shield fluctuation near the exhaust port. From there, they would head to the hyperdrive systems. If they could disable them, the station would become a stranded fortress, vulnerable to eventual destruction. Meanwhile, the rebellion would launch a diversion, a desperate frontal assault to occupy the Imperial fleet. It was reckless, risky, nearly impossible, but it was all they had. The plan began exactly as Ahsoka had predicted. Rebel ships surged forward, exposing themselves to draw the Imperial lines in. But on the command deck of the Death Star, Thrawn watched the tactics unfold with a faint narrowing of his eyes. He recognized them. These were Clone Wars maneuvers. These were her maneuvers. Ahsoka Tano's. His unease deepened. 2 Jedi, the boy he suspected to be Skywalker's son, and the apprentice who he had once fought alongside Anakin Skywalker. Jedi were variables Thrawn could not calculate with certainty. So he summoned Vader. The Dark Lord of the Sith emerged from his meditation chamber, silent and towering. Thrawn explained the rebels would attempt to board the station. It was the only rational explanation for such an attack. And if Ahsoka Tano was with them, then it was all but guaranteed. Vader returned to his chamber, plunging into the dark side, reaching through the Force to sense her presence. But Thrawn did not rely on mysticism. He relied on strategy. The faulty shield near the exhaust port was no accident. He had planted that rumour himself, leaking it with surgical precision. And now, as he had calculated, the rebels flew directly into the trap. The infiltration team slipped through the shield, undetected. For a moment, hope sparked. Then, the blast doors sealed behind them, and the shadows moved. Blaster fire erupted. Stormtroopers poured from the corridors, cutting off every exit. Red-bladed lightsabers hissed to life as 4 Inquisitors stepped forward. And in the centre of it all, standing with his hands calmly behind his back, was Grand Admiral Thrawn. The rebels froze. They had been played from the very beginning. The chamber erupted into chaos. Ahsoka and Rex charged toward the towering figure of Darth Vader. The duel was immediate and brutal. Rex's blaster fire was swatted aside like raindrops. Ahsoka danced with speed and precision, her twin blades flashing against Vader's crimson. But he was relentless. Every strike forced them back. Every moment revealed the truth. He was toying with them. Han and Chewbacca ducked behind cover, unleashing a barrage against Thrawn's guard. They fought with grit, with desperation, and slowly, Piece by piece, they cut the squad down. Luke Skywalker ignited his saber against the Inquisitors. 4 against 1. Their red blades struck from every angle, but R2 whirred, releasing a thick smokescreen into the chamber. The Inquisitors faltered, blinded, but Luke had trained for this. On Dagobah, sight had been stripped from him daily. Now, he fought by instinct, by the Force alone. R2-D2 sliced into the terminal and set alarms off all throughout the station. Troopers would react to each alarm. There would be no reinforcement coming. In the darkness, screams echoed. One by one, the Inquisitors fell, until Luke stood alone among their bodies, his chest heaving, but his resolve unshaken. When the smoke cleared, Luke strode forward, blade in hand, and faced Thrawn directly. Thrawn, unarmed, did not move. Instead, he spoke. "You fight for a galaxy you do not understand, young Skywalker. You seek to destroy this station, yet it is the very thing maintaining order. Without it, chaos will consume the stars. Join me. Together, we can build a galaxy of stability, of peace, a galaxy where no child suffers the fate your father did." Luke's grip tightened. He was done listening to Imperial lies. But then, Thrawn stopped moving. His eyes studied Luke with a quiet, predatory focus, as though the duel, the chaos, even Vader himself, were secondary to the truth he was about to unleash. "Skywalker," he said softly, almost reverently, "your name alone betrays the lie you've been living." Luke's guard faltered for half a second, his brows knitting. "What do you mean?" Thrawn allowed himself the faintest smile, his voice low and calm, carried through the chamber like a death knell. "You stand here, blinded by loyalty to a cause that cannot win, never once questioning the shadow that hovers over you. Tell me, why do you think the Empire hunts you with such obsession? Why do you think Lord Vader himself stalks your every step?" Luke's chest tightened, his breath quickening. "Because I'm a Jedi," he snapped. But there was hesitation in his voice. Thrawn's eyes narrowed, and with razor precision, he cut the silence. "No, because you are his son." The words detonated in Luke's mind like an explosion. His blade trembled. His heart slammed against his ribs. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then, from across the chamber, the duel itself seemed to collapse. Vader froze, his crimson blade locked with Ahsoka's, but motionless. The sound of his mechanical breathing thundered in the sudden quiet. Luke turned, every instinct screaming for denial. But what he found was worse than any nightmare. The black mask turned toward him, deliberate, heavy with inevitability. Vader's voice carried no menace now, only a weight that crushed the boy's soul. "It is true, Luke. I am your father." The words struck like lightning, cleaving through everything Luke thought he knew. His knees nearly buckled. His grip on the saber faltered. He shook his head in disbelief, in horror, but deep inside, the Force whispered confirmation. "No," Luke's voice cracked, raw with desperation. "No, that's impossible." But the mask said nothing more. The silence, the steady hiss of mechanical breath, was answer enough. Vader had never intended for this to be revealed this way. Certainly not by Thrawn's cruel hand. Rage boiled beneath the vocoder, every exhale a snare. Yet the truth, once spoken, could not be taken back. And in that terrible moment, the battle shifted, not in blades, but in hearts. Luke's resolve crumbled. Ahsoka's eyes widened in horror. Rex, struck silent, felt the galaxy tilt off its axis. Thrawn merely folded his hands behind his back, watching as if the revelation itself were his greatest victory. Muffled screams. That's all Luke Skywalker heard. They came from everywhere and nowhere. Echoes in his mind. Fragments of pain rippling through the Force. The ghosts of Yavin. The cries of those lost when the Death Star fired. The anguish of millions silenced in an instant. He shot up, gasping, his vision spinning. Then he remembered. Thrawn, Vader, the truth. I am your father. The words still burned in his skull like a searing blade. His whole world, his identity, his purpose, his hope had shattered in one breath. The storm of emotions inside him was like nothing Yoda had ever prepared him for. He felt sick, betrayed, empty. Then, Luke! A hand gripped his shoulder, dragging him back into the chaos. Han Solo was shouting over the thunder of blaster fire. "Snap out of it, kid! We've gotta move!" The Death Star shook violently. Sirens screamed through the corridors. Somewhere deeper within the station, the self-destruct chain had begun. The result of Han and Chewie's quick improvisation, while everyone else was locked on Luke. The team was sprinting toward the hangar, fire and smoke filling the air. Leia was already waving them forward, her blaster flashing as she cleared the way. But Luke wasn't running. Not yet. He glanced back. The hallway behind him glowed crimson. Vader's silhouette was there, striding through the smoke. Unstoppable. Relentless. Luke knew. He couldn't let them all die. They burst onto the landing platform. The stolen shuttle was waiting, engines roaring. "Come on, Luke!" Leia shouted, waving him in. But he didn't move. He stood in the doorway, back turned to them, watching the corridor behind. Leia's heart dropped as she realized what he was doing. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Luke, don't!" He turned to her and smiled. A small, broken smile. The kind that said he already knew his fate. "May the Force be with you," he said softly. Then he thrust out his hand. The Force exploded from him in a violent wave, slamming the shuttle door shut and throwing the craft backward into launch position. Leia's cry was the last thing he heard as the ship blasted away from the hangar. Luke turned, alone now, facing two shadows. Thrawn stood calmly at Vader's side, his white uniform immaculate even in the chaos. "Lord Vader," he said evenly, "we must leave. The reactor is unstable." But Vader didn't move. His gaze was locked on Luke. "This ends here," Luke said, igniting his saber. "Indeed," Thrawn murmured, and stepped back. He was no fool. He understood the calculus of survival. With one final look at the two Skywalkers, father and son, he turned and strode toward his personal escape shuttle. Vader, however, remained. The duel began. Luke attacked first. His strikes were wild, desperate, but powerful. The Force roared around him. Fear, anger, sorrow, all intertwined. Vader deflected each blow with effortless precision. "You cannot win," the Dark Lord said, his tone almost regretful. "I don't need to," Luke spat. "I just need to keep you here." Their sabers locked, sparks raining between them. The heat of the blades reflected in Luke's furious eyes. Vader pushed back, his strength monstrous. "You are strong, my son, but you fight without focus." "I fight for them," Luke shouted, breaking the lock and swinging with a surge of fury. "For everyone you've murdered." "Enough," Vader's voice boomed, shaking the chamber. "You cannot change what you are." Luke's blade whirled, cutting through machinery and leaving trails of molten metal. "And what's that?" he yelled. Vader's answer came like thunder. "My blood." The duel intensified. Every strike was a conversation, every parry a wound reopened. Luke's body ached, his breath ragged, but he refused to stop. If he could just delay Vader long enough, the others might escape. Then, a massive explosion rocked the platform. A section of the floor gave way. Luke staggered, and in that instant, Vader struck. The blow wasn't meant to kill. The hilt of Vader's saber slammed into Luke's temple. Darkness swallowed him whole. When Luke awoke, he wasn't standing. He was lying across the cold metal floor of a shuttle. The walls trembled around him. He looked through the viewport just in time to see the Death Star. The Rebellion's flagships streaked away at full speed, Leia's shuttle safely in tow. Behind them, the space station shuddered, light pouring from its seams like cracks in a dying sun. The super laser core detonated, and the Death Star, that colossal symbol of Imperial might, imploded. The light consumed everything. Through the Force, Luke felt the cries of thousands vanish in an instant. Imperial officers, troopers, pilots, all erased. Leia's voice echoed faintly, screaming his name through the void before vanishing into hyperspace. The galaxy went silent. Vader stood beside him in the cockpit, unmoving, watching the inferno. The reflection of the explosion burned in his mask. For the first time in years, he felt nothing, only loss. Weeks passed. Vader's shuttle disappeared from Imperial scanners. Thrawn presumed him dead. The Emperor, though displeased, focused his fury on rebuilding. Project Necromancer still demanded his full attention. But Vader lived, far beyond known space, on a desolate, mist-covered world. He kept his son prisoner. Luke woke each day chained, his body weak, his mind tormented. Vader would come, sometimes in silence, sometimes in fury. "You have potential beyond measure," he would say. "You could rule the galaxy." "I won't become what you are," Luke would spit back, and the cycle would repeat. Hours of silence, followed by lectures, by duels meant not to train, but to break. Yet what truly broke Luke was not pain, it was isolation. Then, one day, Vader changed his tone. His voice softened, almost calm. "If you will not join me," he said, "perhaps your sister will." The world stopped. Luke's heart froze. "How do you—" "The Force has revealed her to me," Vader said darkly. "She is strong, perhaps stronger than you. If you will not stand beside me, she will take your place." Luke screamed. It wasn't a sound of defiance, but of pure, uncontrolled rage. The darkness that Vader had been nurturing finally took hold. Months later, a new figure appeared on the galactic stage. A masked warrior known only as Marek. He struck Imperial outposts with brutal precision. Wielding a crimson saber, the rebellion, desperate, believed he was a savior, a rogue freedom fighter waging war in their name. Leia felt something familiar about him, but she couldn't see past the mask. In truth, Marek was Luke Skywalker, reshaped by Vader's manipulation and blinded by rage. Every mission, every battle, pushed him deeper into the darkness, and Vader watched with pride as his apprentice, his son, brought entire sectors to their knees. But the galaxy never stood still. Grand Admiral Thrawn, ever the tactician, began to suspect. He studied Marek's movements, fighting patterns, the unmistakable precision in his piloting, and he knew. He brought his findings before the Emperor. "Vader has turned the boy," Thrawn said coolly. "They move together. Soon they will come for you." Palpatine's grin was cold. "Then let them." The trap was elegant. Thrawn's flagship, the Executor, had been refitted as a lore. Its command bridge designed to appeal to Vader's pride. Rumours spread of Thrawn's growing influence, of how he had taken Vader's title and authority. Vader took the bait. He and Marek tore through Imperial defences, cutting a bloody path to the bridge. The Force trembled with their fury. But when the blast doors opened, the sight that met them froze them in place. At the far end of the bridge, the Emperor sat in his throne, his eyes gleaming with malice. Thrawn stood at his side, calm and composed, and kneeling before them, bruised, gagged and beaten, were Leia, Han, Chewbacca and Captain Rex. Luke's breath caught. "Leia." Thrawn stepped forward. "Remove your mask, Marek. There is no more need for games." Luke hesitated, but when his eyes met Leia's, filled with recognition and pain, he obeyed. The mask hit the floor with a metallic clang. Palpatine's smile widened. "Ah, the prodigal son returns." Vader tensed. He could feel Luke's heart breaking, his light struggling to breathe beneath the suffocating darkness. "Now," the Emperor hissed, Strike down your father. Take his place at my side. Do this, and your friends will live. Luke's saber trembled in his hands. I won't. Thrawn sighed quietly. Then, my boy, look to your right. Luke turned. A wall panel slid open, and the lifeless body of Ahsoka Tano fell forward, collapsing at his feet. Time stopped. Luke dropped to his knees, his voice cracking as he reached for her. No, 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 no! When he looked up, Rex and Han were shot where they knelt. The galaxy broke. Luke screamed, a sound that tore through the Force itself. Power surged outward in a shockwave, so violent it shattered glass across the entire bridge. Thrawn and the Emperor were thrown backward. Leia and Chewbacca's restraints snapped. Chewbacca, roaring in pure Wookiee rage, lunged for Thrawn and tore him apart limb by limb. Luke turned to the Emperor. His rage ignited into something primal, cosmic. Lightning erupted from his fingertips. Not red, not blue, but white. Pure, burning fury. The Emperor's scream echoed through the bridge as the light consumed him. When the glow faded, nothing remained but ashes. Luke stood trembling, surrounded by fire and death. When he turned, Vader was gone. Leia approached slowly, her voice trembling. Luke, please, come with me. Come home. He looked at her, haunted, broken, eyes glowing faintly from the power still coursing through him. I can't, he whispered. Not like this. I have to find balance again, before I lose everything. He turned away, staring out the viewport at the stars beyond. I'm going back to Dagobah. I need to learn control. And with that, he walked into the shadows, leaving behind the ashes of the Empire, the ruin of legend, and the faint, dying echo of the Skywalker name. Thanks for watching this video with me. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, it really helps the channel grow. Comment below which theories you would like explored, and I will choose one for my next series. Thanks for watching.